What's up, guys? Welcome to Modern Empire. I'm your host, Christian Stone. I'm here with my co-host, Brian Decker. Welcome to episode 1, you guys, where we're going to meet the host of the show.
I know, I'm excited, Christian, and I think when you and I sat down and we talked about this and we were like, why do people want to hear? You and I know, always get asked, where'd you guys get to where you're at? I was fortunate enough to kind of have a really cool pops that, would get up at 4 a.m. and allowed my mom to stay at home with us, even though when he was only making like 40 grand a year. And, I got to watch that hard work and where he's at. And I know you had something similar too. And so, I know when we came up with this kind of concept, we wanted to give people real stories on how people from our area and around the country came from nothing and made something with no privilege.
Right. I mean, that was my whole point. Like, I don't want to, you're in mortgage, I'm in real estate. I didn't want to do like that bland, boring, dry podcast where you're like, oh, hey, this is how to take a listing, right? I wanted something that could motivate you and at least, teach you skills, because there's a big disconnect between successful people and unsuccessful people. They always think that they started as successful people, right? So This podcast, we're going to interview people who are at the top of their game, doing real good things and still striving every day to get even more successful. We're going to interview them and show you kind of what they have in common, basically what they do and where they started.
Yeah, I know exactly. And I think it's one of those funny things where people always say, it's your first million's your hardest to make, but when you make it, it's much easier to make it afterwards. Well, the same's kind of true that I realized once I started becoming very successful, I ended up being introduced to a lot of individuals who came from nothing, and, they're all walks of life. I mean, people in my neighborhood, we even, have a family in our neighborhood that, they have a crazy, crazy trash empire, and I got to hear stories, and I get to sit down at the table and find these guys that have built these multi-billion-dollar businesses. Yeah. But I never got those experiences when I wanted to hear those stories, when I needed to hear those stories, and so I know with this, we have been both fortunate to know some really cool people, everything from people that, started growing marijuana and storage, storage containers and now own millions of square feet of grow to, I know you have some awesome connections as well.
Oh yeah. My plan is, we got people who are, I'm younger. I just turned 28 last week. So basically, I want to take it as the younger generation too, because people think, to be successful, you have to be like 40 and above, right? Or 50 or older. How old are you again?
I'm 35, man.
35. Okay. So you're still crazy young,
Yeah.
So I want to interview some of the younger people also who are killing it right now and just starting out. I think that's going to be huge for the show.
Yeah. And I know when you and I first met, I always thought you were kind of in real estate because you were so young. I'm like, there's no way he had a, kind of a career, any kind of ambitions. I assumed you just kind of went right into real estate. It was nuts when I found out that you actually, your dream, quote unquote, was, to be a nurse or an EMT, and you had hoped one day to, maybe make $100,000 a year, and you were willing to get in a couple $100,000 in debt about that, and not that there's anything wrong with that, but you knew that wasn't for you. Kind of tell me a little bit how you, made that transition.
Okay, so for me, I went straight into construction out of high school, and then I went into working at Hemet Hospital. Actually, it's just the very bottom at Hemet Hospital. Went to EMT school, got my EMT license, and then I'm like, all right, guys, I'm going to go to nursing school. I'm going to make a ton of money being a nurse. And, my goal was always, nurses make about $80,000 a year. They could top out at 120, 140. So my goal was always to make $100,000 a year. I'm like, okay, when I make $100,000 a year, I have made it. And that was always my goal. So going from EMT to nursing school was kind of just that transition to where you started going to school at night, working during the day. I actually bought a house at that time.
Jeez.
Yeah, I was 20.
What were you making back then, if you don't mind me asking, when you did that?
I was making like $36,000 a year.
Ooh,
yeah.
That's quite the feat to take on a $3,000 a month salary.
Yeah. Remember, this was 2013. Gotcha. So the house was like $110,000, right? But we bought our first house, it was in Hemet, and I liked that experience. And the real estate agent that I had at the time was he helped me through the entire process. He communicated. He was really good. So in 2014. So it was about the house 2012, 2014. I was like, okay, I'm going to sell the house because I bought it for like 110. It was worth like 180. Wow. And I was like, I'm going to pay off all my debt. And the plan was to go to nursing school and only work part-time.
Okay. Okay.
So I called that same realtor because he was so good, right? And I was like, hey, I need you to come over. I need to sell my house. And he's like, okay, I'll be right over. Same day, right? Same day, literally
Good
came over
agent.
to the house. During that time, I was also like doing trucks. I'd buy a truck, have it for a while, put a lift kit on it, tires, wheels, and then I'd sell it for more money. And then
Okay.
I'd buy a new truck. So I was kind of like flipping trucks, right? And he was there taking pictures of my house, and I had a guy there buying the truck. And he was just listening, kind of just heard some of the conversation. He's like, you're really good at sales. You're really good at talking to people. Because the guy bought that truck, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's like, you ever think about real estate? I'm like, no way, man. I'm going to nursing school. That's why I'm selling the house. I'm going to have the money to go to nursing school and no debt. We'll be, everything paid off. We'll rent for a couple of years and then I'll be making $100,000 a year, right?
Yeah.
And then I saw what he was making on the sale of the house, right?
I saw your net sheet.
Yes, I saw my net sheet. So I had no idea, not necessarily what realtors make, because we all know, that's not exactly what we make. But my mind thought, wow, he could make X amount off of one deal. I could sell 20 or 30 of these a month.
Yeah.
Now,
what did you do now? Because, let's be realistic. There is so many people right now, especially in the market, they see their net sheet and they're like, oh, I can do this. I want to make $6 or $8 grand.
Yeah.
But they move into the industry and they only sell one house,
Right.
2 houses a year.
Right.
Now, how many houses did you, end up selling in your, first or second full year of doing this?
Oh, gosh, my first full 12 months, I ended up selling 29 houses.
Wow.
Yeah, and that was the first year in the business. So it was pretty epic.
Now, what did you end up, making that year? Because I know your goal as a nurse was to make $100,000, and that was probably 4 or 5 years of school plus a lot of night shifts. When did you ended up making that year off that first year?
So we're here in California, so we get half of everything taken from us, basically.
Yeah.
I ended up netting about 180,000 my first year. And I think, you asked me before we started this, what was the click? And for me, that was the click. It was like, okay, I can, do A, B, and C and get X, Y, and Z. So I was like, it was like the big picture sort of thing for me. That's when it really clicked after my first year. And that's when and that was half the year was part-time.
Jeez.
Because I was doing real estate. I was waking up at 4 a.m, doing real estate till noon, and then going into the hospital from 1 until 11 at night.
Yeah.
So it was just a constant grind like that for 6 months. And that, once I saw kind of what I was making and the hard work that you had to put in and what led to the results, I was like, okay, I can do this.
Yeah. And something you just said there stuck with me. And this is one thing that I've known of every successful individual I've ever met.
Mm-hmm.
And I read this article in Forbes, and it was about 10 years ago. And what it said was specific traits of, they classified everybody into what they called 3 people. Okay. They said there's people that are born to be employers, people that are born to be employees or have characteristics of just being employees, but there's nothing wrong with that. And then there's people that they said are neutrality. They basically will kind of shift with whatever the market is, and they will also kind of not necessarily really want to give to society. They're more just taking. Okay. Right. And one of the things I thought that was awesome about what they said, that people that were born to employers were this: every single one of them got up and got their day started by at least 5:30 in the morning.
Right.
And they made sure to live a healthy lifestyle on it. And they were always, at one point or another, always with the understanding that to be successful took multiple paths or multiple, streams of income. And you right away, you were in school, being a nurse, you were working construction, and you were flipping trucks.
Yeah.
Okay. That right there, it just puts you in that employer's path, And one thing I think that is so awesome. Now, where did you in your life see that you understood, some people may be more intelligent, some people may have a better, educational background, but nobody can outwork you. Now, where did you see that?
I would say, as far as the work part, Brian, is because, so like I said, I have this click to where if I see the results, I'm all in. So for me, and I'll work as hard as I can to get that result first, right? I think that's a little bit of the difference. Is people want to work a little bit and then get the result right away. Well, I have like the eye on the prize sort of mentality, right? But if you can see little results along the way, that's what pushes me even further. So that's what makes me get up early, makes me start my day before half the people in the world are awake,
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's funny because there isn't a secret to be successful. I know I get asked all the time, like, oh, did you inherit money or did you do this? No, you know what? I just understood that I will outwork you.
Yeah.
I will outwork you. Yeah. You may be better at sales than me. You may have a higher IQ than me, but I will outwork you, and you cannot teach hard work. No. And at the end of the day, I knew going into the office when I was originally in the industry, I saw, kind of, one of my really good friends, and I thought I was pretty cool at the time, and I would get to work at like 6:15, and I went and worked at a new company, and there was this guy in there that he did not have a math background like I did, and he was at his desk at 4:45 in the morning. Wow. And the dude was making 3 times my income. I was like, he's not any, better spoken than I am. He just freaking outworks me. Yeah. He outworks me. And I was so obsessed with getting to work earlier than him or matching his pace. And I was fortunate enough to see that. And I knew when we talked about this podcast, that's what I want to give people. Yep. I want to give people the experience where they can see random individuals who are not, the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world or the Bill Gates in the world that just have this innate ability to be successful because of a God-given intelligence. Yep. I want to take the people like you and a lot of the other individuals that we know that just said, you know what? I am tired of being complacent with my life. I'm going to get my butt up at 4:30 in the morning. And if I don't have something to do, I'm going to find something to do to kind of create some wealth.
Right. And that's my whole point too. Like I know a guy that I went to, friends of friends went to high school with, and they're local here now. And they went from just being a Joe Schmo in high school, not much, to people starting his own turf business. And now it's a $15 million business at 25 years old. Jeez. But, and then those guys, like, your friends that are multimillionaires and started from the very rock bottom, and we know what that rock bottom is, and we'll be interviewing them and talk to them. But those people aren't special. Like you said, they weren't born with an ability to go out and do something, right? They just, there's things that they have in common. And that's the whole point for me of the podcast, is to point out what I have in common with you, what you have in common with those people, because there is something inside every successful person that does that like switch, right? And I want to figure out what that switch is so that all the listeners can find that switch in themselves, right? And then turn it and obviously grow a successful business, a product, anything they want to do.
Yeah. And I think that once you kind of get into that successful path, what you're able to see is other individuals when I pull different traits out of them. So I'll look at, for an example, like I knew in my life, one of the things that I really struggled with a lot of times was the balance of work and family, right? Mm-hmm. I got 2 little kids that are 2 and 3, a beautiful wife, but I'm also leaving my house at 4:30 and I'm having to force myself to get home by 7 o'clock. And it was getting later and later. And so I reached out to a good friend of mine who's a lot older than me that went through it. And he said something that's very important to me. He said, you know what? At the end of the day, what you need to figure out is you need to set a hard time that you leave that office every day. That door shuts at 6 o'clock because you will never get the years back with your children. Yeah. You will never get those years back. You can always make money. You can always make that additional phone call. You need to have that hard stop line. And you figure out how to get all your work done, and you just become more efficient. And you make it a point that leaving that office at 6 or 6:15 is not an option, because at the end of the day, it's that work-family balance. And that is something that I was fortunate enough to hear because I was able to run in those circles. And what I want to do is bring those circles in here so our audience gets to experience that.
Right, and that's perfect. I love that. And speaking about that, so tell me a little bit about you, Brian. How old are you? How long have you been in real estate mortgage industry? A couple key points.
Yeah, I actually, believe it or not, when I graduated college, I had 2 crazy roommates of mine. And, I was always kind of a mathlete. I didn't necessarily look like a math nerd, but, I was a math nerd. I kept it, incognito. And right out of college, I got a pretty prestigious job working at a big accounting firm. It was like my dream. Like yours dream was to be a nurse.
Did you get a degree?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I ended up getting a degree, but I actually still have 2 classes before I get my actual diploma mailed.
Oh, shoot.
But I figure it's been what now? 14 years. So I figure I'm
Forget it. I don't need the piece of paper.
Yeah, I'm gonna go take history and art class. At 35. And ended up getting out. went into the world of accounting, got my first paycheck, and it was $1,700 for 2 weeks. I worked 60 hours. And my two, roommates at the time who I tutored through math got in the mortgage industry back in 2004 and were bringing home like 20 grand a month. And these dudes could barely add 2 + 2,
Yeah.
And so I, much to the dismay of my family, I left it, worked in the world of mortgage, and got in it. And I treated it differently. I treated it like a career. And I knew that if I was going to leave a very, good path to potentially someday, like you, make 6 figures, but it was going to take me probably 15 years of my career, that I was going to make the best of it. But I was young. I was in my 20s, was starting to make decent money, but I was partying, man.
Yeah.
There's no secret to it.
Where were you living at that time?
I was in Orange County.
Okay.
I was working. I was making, good money, at the time, probably making, 200 grand a year. So I was in my mid-20s. Loving life, and then kind of the world crashed on me a little bit.
I was going to ask you about that. So I kind of heard on the grapevine that there was some sort of like Ponzi scheme that basically took you from, like you said, in your mid-20s to making $200,000 a year, which is a lot for early 20s, right? So, I mean, to anybody, that's a lot of money. To what? To zero, right?
Yeah. So I was banking a decent amount of money, and I was about 28. So the mortgage industry crashes, and this is in 2009. And to kind of supplement my income, at the time I was about 27 years old. I had saved up about 300 grand.
Wow.
Which was, that was the world to me.
Yeah.
I was living in a nice house, driving nice cars, whole 9 yards, but I knew the mortgage industry was going down, so I had an opportunity to invest with a friend of mine's father. He gave me some insight about, with the industry around us and the economy crashing, there's some foreign currency opportunity, to be able to trade. And so I invested 300 grand of my money, everything. I had like 5 grand left in my account. And I started getting some checks in. I started getting 10 grand a month in for about 3 months.
Okay.
And then I get a call. I'll never forget it. 27 years old, like I said, mind you, the industry's kind of crashed. So, I went from making 20 grand a month to maybe 5 grand a month, which is a big drop, but I'm getting supplemented, right? I get a phone call from a buddy of mine and is like, hey, I just want to let you know, John, who was I'm not going to say his last name, even though I should, took all of our money. He took $11 million, and we have nothing left. Him and his partner are on the run. It was actually an American Greed episode, believe it or not. The actual trader who actually took the money, his name's James Kopp. It's, you can actually look it up and watch the American Greed episode. And I just remember grabbing a trash can and throwing up in it and being like, holy crap, I have just lost everything. I am 27 years old. I was living high for 5 years. The industry is crashing. What the heck?
That gives me the chills. I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
That's crazy. And I'm assuming at that time you had car payments, a mortgage, right? And were you married at that time?
No, thank God.
Okay.
But,
So basically, rock bottom, no money, and mortgage industry is in a crisis. Holy smokes, man.
Yeah, it was nuts. And my bills at that time were like probably 7-8 grand a month between, I had a $2,000 a month car payment, man. I was, and like I said, I was just kind of living that life, and I thought it was okay because I was actually pretty smart. I was saving money, I had maybe I was making 200 grand a year for maybe 6 years, and to save 300 grand of it after taxes, I was actually being somewhat pretty frugal, and it's all gone. So I basically knew I had 2 choices in life. I could either feel sorry for myself and be mad at the world, or I could make a change. So I gave up the nice house I had living in Newport Beach. I kept my car because it was a lease and I didn't want to ruin my credit.
Right.
So I couldn't do that. I knew I had about 6 grand in my, checking accounts and savings account at the time. So I moved down to a crappy little 2-bedroom apartment. Mind you, I was living in a 3,500 square foot, $1 million house at the time in Newport Beach.
Wow.
And moved into an apartment, hit up my little brother to split rent with me because he was in college at the time, and he was getting some student loan money to help him pay some of the rent because I couldn't even afford the $1,700 a month rent, so I had to split it. And I made a decision. I was like, I can either double down at this time in my life, and I can take this money and I can figure out a way to make a lot of money with it, or I can give up. And I wasn't going to give up. So I took that money, and I knew that I could leverage that money in a time when the mortgage industry was crashing. That means so many people were running from it. And it was a chance for me to capture a lot of market share. So I took that money. I had an American Express card with a $20,000 limit on it. And I went and I did a direct mail campaign where I put some, mailers together to mail out to people to do refinances, because at the time rates were actually dropping, believe it or not. And that was June of 2010. And I worked 7 days a week. I worked from my crappy little apartment kitchen, and I just put my nose to the grindstone. I didn't go out. I didn't party. I moved from Orange County to San Diego, so I didn't know anybody. So I had no friends down there. And I'll never forget it. December of 2010 comes around. I have no money in my bank account. I owe $20,000 on an Amex card. And I have 24 loans that fund that month, and I got a check on that at the time it was about $140,000.
Yes.
And I, like you, was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to figure out a way to duplicate that, and not give up, do things the right way, treat people. My dad always taught me, you treat people the right way, you take care of your clients, the money will follow, And so I came up with the concept of paying for people's appraisals because at the time, all these banks were, making people pay $500-$600 a month for appraisals, and it would push a lot of people off because at the time house prices were dropping so much, right? So people were unsure of their value. So I put that in there. And then here it is, what is that, 8 years later now, and, been fortunate enough to be now one of the, top 15 guys in the country, and, been making 7 figures a year, every year for the last about 7 years. And it wasn't just 8 years ago, that I did that. And I was very fortunate to have an awesome role model in my dad around me that I knew how to emulate that,
So, I mean, if people look at Brian Decker now, they think, wow, this guy is so successful. He was born like that. He was born a lender, right? You came out and Brian's a lender. He's so good, and born with a ton of money. To hear that 8 years ago, and they say it takes at least 10 years to build a 7-figure business, right? 8 years ago, having $6,000 in the bank.
Yeah.
That's insane, man. That's the kind of, I'm sure we could dig so far deeper into your story, but one thing that I really heard was you said that you put your nose to the ground and you worked 7 days a week.
Yep.
What do you think? Do you think, Brian's perspective, do you think that is a key factor in people who are running successful businesses? Or do you think that's something from if you're starting at the bottom?
I think, to be honest with you, now I don't do that, but that's what it takes. I didn't have the ability to hire assistants. So I was the receptionist, the processor, the salesman, the marketer, the accountant. I had to do it all. And I had to wear 5 or 6 or 7 hats because I couldn't pay other people for those hats. So there is, when you are getting into an industry or you are getting into a field where you have to work multiple 40-hour jobs in a week. And the only way to do that, there's 24 hours in a day. You got to sleep. So there's only so many hours in that week. So I just had to use every single hour. And then once you get past that point, then you start to learn. And it's hard for a lot of people. You have to learn to delegate. You then, okay, you know what? Rather than me doubling my salary, I'm going to keep my salary the same, and I'm going to hire 2 people and leverage them. So now that I have 3 people that are selling, and you have to invest in your business because it takes money to make money, and so many people want to put that money in their pockets. And the difference between successful people I've seen and non-successful people is they will make no money or just enough money to pay their bills and invest everything else in their business because they believe in it versus people want to pull their chips off the table to go buy a new car.
And I think that what you said right there is because, and it's a better consumer experience where you're at now than Brian working 7 days a week, right? Because now if you're not available because you're with your kids, your assistant is available, John's available. Somebody's always available for the consumer. So I feel like you have people now, and like this is the whole point of our podcast as well. People, there's this saying going around and it bugs me to death. I told you about it earlier. It's happiness is the new rich. Right. And I'm just like, okay, come on. Because they think what some people think is that Brian working 7 days a week wasn't happy, which sure, maybe you weren't at the time. And I'm sure your mindset was very hard, which we'll talk about too in further episodes. Your mindset shift, right? To get over that, for just not giving up, to jump into that. But yeah, there's a transition from, okay, maybe not being as happy right now, but once again, seeing the end result, right? Because I'm sure Brian's pretty darn happy now, you know?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I think it's my thing with society too, is the participation award, right? The participation award was the downfall of our society.
100%.
You know, and I always joke around with my grandfather. My grandfather's 83 years old. You know, he was born in the 30s. You know, he is an absolute savage when it came to the fact of understanding the American work ethic and just outworking everybody. And we always joke around all the time, is when did we start giving people awards just for participating in something? And that is, our society has made that shift, and they're participating in something should just be required. You should give your participation. You should, put your effort forward. Now, what should be rewarded is the people that exceed and excel and do great and be rewarded in those. Now, don't get me wrong. The measure of success doesn't always need to be the person that, is in first place. There can also be, I think there's a lot of merit in somebody that comes from the bottom and makes it to the middle of the pack.
Oh, heck
right?
Yeah. Right.
That is a giant move. You go from 100th place to 50th place. You've jumped up 50 spots.
Yeah.
That needs to be rewarded. It's just not everybody of the 100 that participate. Here's your participation award. Congratulations.
Correct. And I think, and that's exactly why I want to do this, because I feel like society as a whole is mediocre. And I feel like because someone doesn't want to take 8 years, right, to make a 7-figure business, they'd rather be happy. So happy is almost the new excuse, right?
Exactly.
Because, okay, you may struggle, but it's if you have the eye on the prize and you can figure out what to tweak, right, in your business. Because if you do go 10, 20, 30 years of never being successful, you need to change something, right?
Exactly.
So that's a whole point that we're going to have in this show as well, is what you need to change. Because there may be someone who owns a business, they're 7 years in and they're still making 80 or 90,000 a year, which in my mind, if you're working 6-7 days a week, you're 7 years in, you need that switch, right? So we're going to find that switch with people you're interviewing, people I'm interviewing, and we'll find the switch and we'll teach them how to turn it for themselves, right?
Exactly. And I think what people should be excited for is coming up on our next episode is not one you're going to miss. I had the very fortunate viewing position of watching these two dudes that are both in their mid-30s, where it wasn't but, 8 years ago, these guys who didn't know each other at the time were each kind of doing the same things in different parts of the country, literally when it was still illegal at the time. Mind you, neither one of them smoke. They saw a business opportunity. They both actually, graduated very, very high, in college in their classes, and started growing marijuana in rented storage units.
Wow.
And now they are owners of the largest dispensary in the country. They have millions of square feet of grow, have extraction labs. They are at the point now where it wouldn't be surprised if their business was, getting close to being valued near $1 billion.
Wow. And they're going to be coming in here and we're going to be interviewing them.
Yep.
Figure out what that switch was for them as well.
Exactly.
It's
and
awesome.
Especially with the greenwash, it's one the audience isn't going to want to miss.
Yeah, not at all. I think everybody should stay tuned for that. I'm trying to get the owner of AGL, Artificial Grass Liquidators, in here. He's a busy guy. Your buddy's a busy guy. They have insane schedules. And like I said, he's 24 years old, owning a multi-million dollar company. And it's crazy what he'll have in common with your buddy who owns basically the green business, I guess you could call it.
Exactly.
So I'm excited for that one as well. It's going to be a good time.
Perfect. Well, stay tuned, everybody. And, I know you guys aren't going to want to miss, and it's going to be really interesting, like Christian said, to really see these similar characteristics. And we hope that these people can be that inspiration in your guys' life, so that something that we were privileged to, we're hoping to give to you guys to kind of take you guys from where you're at in life and make you the best version of you.
Perfect. I love it, guys. Stay tuned.
Take care.